Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Hey, Scott.
Good morning, Tammy. How are we doing today?
Great. How are you?
Good. Yeah, things are good up here. Very peaceful up at the cabin.
Oh,
Always love
nice.
getting out in the nature, re-energize.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
like it's beautiful up here. I was just down in Miami for like 2 months, before like coming up here. And I was like, what a world of difference from being like in the tropical
Yeah.
mango laden avocado filled world of bounty and sweat
Hmm.
down there versus
Yep.
coming up here to Michigan. It's beautiful though. All great things. Yeah. And finally then I'll be in Utah after this, I think, with Mark
Oh,
working on yeah, we're gonna be working more into the vault, building more courses into the vault. So that'll be fun.
awesome. Oh, cool.
hmm At least that's what I'll be doing. And then being like, hey guys, look what I created.
Mhm. Awesome.
hmm
We'll get started in about 3 minutes. I see there are a few people that have come in so far.
Yeah, looks like we got Lisa and Sally.
Good morning, everyone.
Trista's here. Jason. Leah's
Morning.
here. Good morning, Leah. Hey, Brendan.
Hey.
Leah, how you doing this morning? Did you have your coffee?
Sorry. Yes, I certainly did. 100%. A while ago, actually. I'm an early bird, so
Good for you. Way to
yeah,
get the day going.
that's right.
Me too. I went to the barista that was here in town, and I told her to surprise me with something. So now I have like a piece of cake that tastes like. I
Amazing.
was like, there's just no
Jeez.
way this could possibly be healthy for me.
It's a treat, right?
It
On a Friday.
is, yeah.
Deserving.
I'm gonna have like a sugar crash, like a 3-year-old. I was like, oh man, afternoon nap in my future. Yeah. Like, watch out. It's good. It's good to see you this morning, Leo.
Yeah, looking forward
Good to
to
see
I
everyone here.
love Sugo. I think great. She's great. So
Yeah, yeah,
look
yeah.
forward to
They're
hearing from her.
fantastic.
Yeah, they really are.
Yeah.
You allowed to say, are you in any of those funds? Did you, or you don't want to say? It's fair. Fair. No answer. Okay.
No,
I like the
I haven't
energy
pushed
ones.
money into Sarah's funds yet, but I intend to here with
Yeah,
the inside of the next rounds of ones that are coming up and likely this one as well. So it's just been bad timing for me, really. It's just when I ever had a lot of my capital is like caught up
yeah,
in really long-term
deployed.
investments, and I
Yeah,
deploy everything that I have really quickly, typically, because I have such strong deal flow. So
great.
so I'm trying to work on that to make sure that I can, um, have money to put into a lot of these different deals with different operators that I like Sarah. So I'll
Great,
be in one of these, if not this deal, then the next one for sure.
great.
So Scott, is that
Hey, good morning, Sarah.
Morning, everyone. How's it going?
Morning.
Good, good. We're just welcoming everybody coming in.
Awesome.
hmm
Constance, have we met?
Cool. Somebody.
yes, yes, we have. We've had some conversations. And in fact, I was praising your approach for, discovering what you really want to Scott. Remember the spreadsheet that said, what do you want? What are you willing to give up? What are you not willing to give up?
Yes.
Yeah.
We're going to be the last activity of today. We're going to go through that.
Oh yeah, it's wonderful. And then recently you asked, like, what was it like growing up? What did your parents teach you? And I sent you like an entire novel.
My goodness, we were overwhelmed, and pretty much everyone said 0 or 1.
Oh, really?
And yeah, like 99% of the email responses we got, because we categorized them, we were like, wow.
Uh-huh.
We had responses that had 0 to 1, because I wanted to know, you know, when I'm speaking to people in my
Of
mass email,
course.
what's the level,
Of course.
what's base level of knowledge? And I was like, okay.
Yeah,
It's-
mine was like 8 or 9. Because
Yeah,
when
so-
I was when I was a kid, my parents bought this old Victorian house, and it had like this lean-to shed, wood shed on the side. And the first thing my mother did was remodel that and start renting it out to college students.
oh. Nice. Yeah.
And I
I
think
feel-
Scott was touching on that as well. What did you learn? And we don't learn this stuff a lot at home. So I think it's a super valuable question to ask. What are those stories that we got? What was the role model that we saw? What were the messages that we heard?
Yeah. I went with my mom to her wealth advisor at Wells Fargo yesterday. And so for 2022, this is recording live. Maybe I'll watch what I say. It was, oh well, I got too far into the story. It was over negative 20% on her 6 accounts with them. And I was like, what if I did negative 20% for my investors? Would anyone come back? No, everyone would be pissed, you know?
And
Like
we're talking about how much the S&P is up this year. It's like, well, if you lost 20% last year, you have to gain what, 50% to be back to even? So
Exactly. They're like, yeah, we're up 9% this year. And it's like, well, but it was negative, and it's not their fault, right? But it's similar to us as operators in real estate. Like there's a lot of stuff going on and it's not our fault, but we still have to make it right by our investors. And we can't just say like, oh, the economy, it's wonky. Sorry, we lost your money, guys. No,
you can
we're
only
like,
sell what they can sell too, right? Like they can't sell away. They can't tell you about things that aren't, saleable
Yeah.
from their perspective. And I
Yeah.
feel like what I learned from my parents was fantastic for the last generation. My father was super successful as like an investor. He's not alive anymore, but he would be in his 90s. So for, the prior 30, 40 years, kind of doing that the 60-40, stocks, bonds and stuff, it was excellent. And now that's totally not working anymore. So you have to learn something totally different.
They showed her this curve and they said, well, this is, modern portfolio theory that we're following. And I recognized it. I did advanced econometrics in college. College was like 25 years ago. It was the same thing. I was like, that stuff was really different 25 years ago than what it is today. You can't follow something from then. My goodness.
And that's why we never invest with banks. Never. Like never, ever invest with banks.
Oh man. So they suggested, what if we just put everything in bonds that get a fixed rate 5%? I was like, well, that's better than what you've been doing for her. So oh man.
Sarah, I'm really curious, like when you were talking earlier about some of like the baselines of like education or where people are coming in to like the nexus of learning about, in our fields of like asset protection, estate planning, tax, wealth building, it's essentially like there's this new endeavor. The other says, well, I want to go do this thing called building wealth. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the things I talked about yesterday was that I was like, you think you're being an investor, but what you're really doing is you're a solopreneur in a wealth company that you're building. And like this wealth company actually has, like it has a legal division and it has a tax division and it has an asset acquisition division. And like what you're really doing is you're actually building together a fractionalized team.
Yes.
So the more that you can have people that are synergized together in pre-built systems and processes and pre-built teams with pre-built meeting sets, the less of a company you're trying to figure out how to build, because you've probably never built a company before.
Right.
And so this is like a way that, and so I was kind of laying that as a foundation yesterday, because I think intuitively, and I was maybe picking up on something that you actually probably know a lot about, which is from the work that you've done with talking to people, is about like, where are they really in the beginning of the journey? Like, what did you learn from your parents? It's like, oh,
Yep.
like maybe I'm a 0 to 1 with how confident I am into these things. And I was just really curious on your viewpoint about like where, a lot of the people that we're endeavoring to help, like more broadly with our companies and inside of these 2 days working with them, where do you really see that the majority of people are at that are like on this curve?
Yeah, so the biggest questions I get are around tax and asset protection. And I'd say like 60% of our investors, they have the money to invest, but they're the first generation to have money to invest. And so they don't have a background, or they're a couple years into having money to invest. So like, wait, now I can do this, but they never took the time before to learn asset protection or anything about, trust or entities or holding companies or tax strategy, because it didn't apply to them before. And now it does. And so I think in all areas, and when we do our events as well, we try to provide experts in the ecosystem. We call it the ecosystem, but same thing, like you're saying, your wealth creation company, you're a solopreneur, same thing, like you need the whole picture, because I can tell you some information, but then you need about my investments, and then you need to take it to your tax strategist, and you need it, they're always like, well, how should I hold this, Sarah? Should I hold it in a trust or an LLC? Or I'm like, that's definitely a question for someone else. You need to have someone on your team who you can ask those questions to, for sure. And I think, yeah, like I said, 60% in all those areas are at a 0 to 1, simply because they're new. So ignorant isn't a bad word, but they're starting from a place of ignorance because they're in the beginning. And that's where we all started at some point, right? And so if they didn't learn from family, now they're learning on their own. And it's a great place, because then you can choose what you teach yourself. You can choose who you pay attention to. So back to what Constance said, we have stories from our parents. Well, if we didn't learn what we needed to know, and we're going out there and figuring out ourselves, we can decide who we're going to follow. We can decide who we're going to look up to, and we can decide who we're going to structure our lives and our goals after.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I love that we're going to decide by looking out in the world, looking at, who has the life that I actually want, who actually has the thing that I'm actually trying to get to, and who do I want to structure what I'm doing, following it after. I think I've seen a lot of people try to do it another way, where then they just kind of try to piece things together, like a little bit from this person, a little bit from over here, a little bit from over here, which I don't necessarily know if that's like wrong, but it seems that it takes a long time to be able to figure it out. And when you're when you don't have a clear picture of like, oh, it's like almost like a mentor, right? Like how much faster does life move if you have a really clear mentor that's teaching you how to do something, versus just like, oh, I'm just randomly like reading books and then trying out stuff and then just seeing like works.
Hi, Mike. Good to see you again.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example of someone I talked to. They do have a coach. They have a mentor that they pay a yearly fee to. They joined a coaching program, and then they booked a one-on-one call with me, and they said, here's my goals. And I said, okay, cool, totally achievable. Let's see where you are today to see how we can get you there. And she's like, wait, what? My coach told me it was impossible. I was like, it's totally, totally possible. And it was very achievable. It wasn't like, oh, I can get you there. And it was like, she wanted to be able to quit her job in 2 years, but she didn't need to not work. Like, she didn't need her passive income to cover her salary. She was okay being like, a fractional CFO for someone or something like that. She just wanted more time. So there's so many ways to get there. And so I was like, oh, well, what if you work part-time, then you do these investments, and equals your salary? You can do that in the next year, right? And she was like, oh, my coach said I couldn't get there. So also I say, if you're listening to someone and they tell you no, or you can't get there, or you can't do that, then just keep searching. You might find someone who can give you the answer that you want, or the solution that you're looking for.
Yeah, that's right. I think I can always tell when I'm finding somebody who's really good, is if they don't tell me no, it's always a yes, if. Yeah, you can have that if you can, da 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 da
Yeah.
da 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 da. And I'm like,
Yeah.
ah, okay, cool. Now I got targets. Cool. And I love, so to go ahead and start to just kind of kick us off into today, one of the things I just wanted to underline, first of all, is just what you do, Sarah, with your investors coming in with these types of conversations that you're having with them. It's like, hey, this is where I'm at. This is where I want to go. I know just like you do, like we do the same thing, which is cool. Let's start looking at the numbers. What
Yeah.
do those numbers, how do those numbers need to shift? How does a portfolio need to change? For us, it's how does a portfolio strategy need to change with tax strategy and pulling those together inside with our CPA, MBA, attorney teams. And that there's a lot of overlap in the worlds that we do with trying to say like, this is the intelligence that's needed to be able to go make a smart decision.
Mhm.
The decisions aren't just something you wing out in the world and then hope that it works out okay. It's like by doing the extra steps and the processes and the spreadsheets, that's the way in which you can get to this one critical thing, which is what is the exact thing I need next? What is the
Yes.
exact kind of investment I'm looking for? Do I need it to be cash flowing? Do I need to have net worth? Do I need to have big depreciation benefits? Because that's going to change what the tool showed me. The spreadsheet showed me this is what I need to go find. And with the clarity and the focus that's able to be achieved by that, now your mind isn't searching for 1,000 things. It's searching for one thing. And inside of what we can all find is one thing. We might not all be able to find 1,000 things, right? And with that kind of clarity and focus is what I've seen as an entrepreneur and as an investor. You can always find it. As long as you know exactly what you're looking for in life, you can almost always find it. It's very,
Mhm.
at least it's the best chance you're ever going to have to find it. And this is where it tees up for us is to say, well, how do you get to that place? You get to that place by being educated. You get to that place by working inside of systems and processes, learning best practices for how to think through how high intelligence works. And yesterday I showed with people a little bit about how some of that like worked with what we had here inside of our our homepage, the website, where we give away all of the vault information to people for free, where they can go inside of here what we call our vault. And inside of the vault is where you're able to then get all the free education on all of the asset protection, the tax, where you can access directly into our team. I don't know if we've showed you this functionality, Sarah, since the last time that we had talked, but we actually have, apart from just having all of our education about all the different types of asset holding companies, the anonymity companies, the different estate planning things, we also have general support here that's totally free that links to our CPAs, our attorneys, our paralegal team, and insurance team. So you're actually able to, without ever paying anything, without even ever hop on a meeting, you can, anybody, including your team or anybody, can pop into here and be able to get extra support, extra education. And then our belief is get educated until the point that you feel ready to start having a conversation. And when you start having ready to have a conversation, we're going to even be able to give you better insights into that. So I also went over yesterday and kind of teeing up for us today, as I showed a graph yesterday that just walked people through. It's like, hey, listen, if you have your money, saving money on tax is one of the best investments you can make because most people are way overpaying on tax. It doesn't cost that much money to save a bunch of money in tax if you're really strategic. We also talked a little bit yesterday about how the investments that you make, it's really important to make the right investments, to look at like a blended ROI. It's not just the cash flow from the investment, but it's how much you're saving in the tax and how like those two things will come together. And then we looked at some graphs yesterday that showed here's one of the reasons that you're going to want to talk to Sarah, because if you invest in the stock market, it's like this 10% return if you look over 40 years or something, but it's like ups and downs and it's non-cash flowing. And if you invested in just single family homes, it kind of looks a little bit like this and it was a little bit better. And syndications are super high, but maybe you don't have all of your money in the world in syndications because, you don't feel comfortable with that. And so maybe there's like a blended place that's in between. So we looked at some of those pieces as well too. And we wrapped up yesterday with just a conversation with bringing everybody together around saying the best way to accelerate your life is to be able to find people that already have what it is that you want and follow exactly what it is they tell you to go do. And that that our teams were working together on being able to basically be able to deliver a full service, a fully complete company. My team's able to build all the foundations for the company with the right fractional team members, the right systems and processes, and all of those things. And that your company adds additional intelligence on the investing side, but as well as the deal flow, like that safe and secure deal flow that people can feel comfortable with. And between those two things, within just a matter of weeks, they should be able to have a fully complete company, have a very high level of investing intelligence, and a great group of people to be able to support them as they move through. And I know everybody's super excited to hear from you here today. So I hope I did a good job of getting everything prepped for your home run presentation here today. And it's my pleasure to turn the mic over to you.
All right, awesome, beautiful. Okay, based on that, while you were talking, I changed some things in my slide deck really quick. I don't want to repeat what you guys already did yesterday, you know?
Yeah, we just barely touched on it, just to be able to like set like, oh, you haven't ever not heard of this before. And so don't I hope I didn't steal any of your thunder, right, so to speak, but we just barely touched on some of these ideas to make sure.
Yeah, perfect. Well, I'm really happy that we're doing this event together, Scott, because what you provide is what so many of our investors at Sugo Capital asked me for. So we did in 2022, it was over 750 one-on-one calls with investors. That was me personally. And so I know my investor base really, really well, and I know the questions that they ask. And it's always around, how do I set up an ecosystem that is not only knowledgeable, but is aligned with what I want to do? So when I went to my first like wealth advisor, you know, we were married for like 2 years, and we're like, hey, we should like figure this out. And we went and talked to someone, and I said, I think I want to do like 50% in real estate. And the guy was like, you batshit crazy. You're not going to build wealth in real estate. And he literally said that to me. You'd be batshit crazy to put 50% of your net worth in real estate. And I was like, okay, like you may be really smart at something, but we're not aligned. Like I'm telling you, this is what I want to do. So I said, no, thank you. I'm not going to work with you, you know, moved on. So it's not only finding people who have the right knowledge and are intelligent, but also who listen to what your goals are and will take you where you want to go. I'll give an example too of my CPA. Is he gave me some advice and then I followed it. And later I went back to him and I said, wait, why did you say that? I just learned this other thing. I should have done this. And he said, yeah, but this is more aligned with your goals of X, Y, and Z. And I said, those are not my goals. My goals are more aligned over here. And he said, I didn't realize that. And that was my own fault. I was not clear with my CPA what my goals were and my priorities were. So he made a suggestion based on what most people's goals were. So it's also all of our responsibility once we, you know, do have this ecosystem. And, you know, if you work with Scott's team and there's an ecosystem there, that you're clear on what your own goals are so that you can relay it to your extended team. So in those 750 calls, you know, a bunch of them I got on the calls and I said, well, what are your goals? And I'm like, I don't know, like maybe quit my job one day soon. Like that's not a goal. Let's get more specific. And, you know, when people say, hey, what's your best investment? And I say, well, is your priority wealth building or cash flow? Well, I don't know. What's your best one? Well, you have to be clear on your own goals first before your investment advisor, your tax strategist, your asset protection professional, before any of us can make the proper recommendation to you. So that's your number one job, is really decide for yourself what your goals are. And then you build that great ecosystem and you tell them what your goals are. And you're really clear with them what your goals are so they can help you get there. Otherwise, everyone's just kind of like faffing around in gray land, and that's not what we want. All right, I'm going to share my screen and get started. Actually, we'll take a look at who's here. I'm going to say hi, Amy. Hi, Ashley. Hi, Bobby. Hi, Kathy. And excuse me. Oh, we got a couple Davids that I know, and Dylan. Nice to see you guys. Elizabeth. Ava, this will be like the 25th time you've seen me give the same talk. But you say you always learn something from it. So hope you enjoy. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share and do slideshow. And forgive my voice today. It was getting a little grapply yesterday, so I hope it sticks with us through today. All right, so my talk today is called Live Your Dream Life. Sometimes I call it Freedom in 3 because I give it over 3 days. Today, we're going to still call it Freedom in 3 because we're going to talk about this over the next 3 hours. But like I'm sure Scott hit on yesterday, why are we here? Why do we bother learning about investing and numbers and asset protection? It's not so that we have more money in the bank, right? That it's what we do with it. It's what we create in our life because of that additional cash flow, or because of that additional security, that additional wealth that we have, that additional knowledge that we're going to be safe in the future so we can do what we want to do today. So our first job as investors is to dream and decide what life we want, and then build a plan to get there. So the first part of today, I'm going to talk about how to really set your goals. And then the rest of the day, we're going to talk about how to get you there. And Tammy's going to help me with some breakout rooms because I've never done that before. But when the time comes, I appreciate your help, Tammy. All right, so what's on the screen is not a random picture of my family. This is the exact moment that I realized I had achieved my goals. So my personal goals are going to be very different from yours, right? But my goal when I started this journey was I wanted to have time freedom, meaning I could spend more time with my kids. I started this journey when my first daughter was born. She's now 10. And I said, oh man, I can't be working so much. I'm working 12-hour days. I don't have time with my babies. I got to figure out a different way. So I wanted time freedom. I also wanted location freedom. I love to travel. I was talking to one of my business partners yesterday, and she's like, oh, we're doing this refinance. We need you to sign all these things and da-da-da. And I was like, well, my husband's in France doing the 600-mile bike race, and then I'm traveling to Turkey and da-da-da. And she's like, you guys are just all over the globe. And I said, exactly why I built my company, because location freedom is really important to me. That was part of my dream life and one of my goals. So I built a way for me to have that. So in this picture, this is in France, in Arcachon. If any of you are oyster lovers, you should definitely go to Arcachon. It is on the west coast of France, and it is like oyster mecca. It's this huge, huge shallow bay. We went for a family vacation for like 4 days, and the weather was amazing. The food was amazing. Where we were staying was amazing. Everyone in the family was having a wonderful time. Now, those of you who have families, you might know that that's not always the case, that everyone is having a great time on the vacation. But it was like everyone thought it was such a fabulous vacation. And so we were walking on the beach, and it was the last day. We're getting ready to go home. And I said to my husband, I said, oh man, I wish we could stay longer. And he said, well, how much longer? I said, oh yeah, we can stay as long as we want. I have time freedom. I have location freedom. I have financial freedom that I can extend and, pay for the holiday. It was like, I had all the things, and I realized in that moment, and this was the moment, I was like, oh my gosh, I did it. I got to all those 3 things. It took me a while because I was faffing around by myself, and I didn't have a team together. I didn't have resources online at that time that I was watching and learning from. And so it took me a longer time to get there. But I want to tell you that story because I was really clear with my goals, and I'm going to talk later today about how I set those goals. But I was really clear about them. And when I became really clear, that's when I was able to achieve them. So think whatever your dream lifestyle is, get really clear on what that looks like. And then we'll talk about how to get you there today. All right. So like I said, so today we're going to talk about what kind of investing is right for you based on your vision, your goals, what you want in your lifestyle. We'll talk on where you'll find the money to invest. I don't know if you went over this, Scott, yesterday, but I'll kind of elaborate on different investments, different pools of money that you might not realize you have that can go into these different types of investments. We'll do some financial modeling and talk about the passive income you'll be able to generate, the returns, the cash flow, or the appreciation, depending on the investments in your goals. And then at the very end, we're going to make a plan. So like Constance said, she's seen this chart. How do we take action after you've been together for 2 days, learning for 2 days? How do you step forward and make a change in your life based on the knowledge you got during these last 2 days? That's where it's going to be really simple. Don't worry. It's going to be easy to use. So like I said, I started my journey 10 years ago, but Sugo Capital started in 2019. Great time, just before a pandemic hit, but it all worked out just fine. So what we do at Sugo Capital is we do tons of education, just like Scott. We give value as much as we can. And then if it works out that what we have as far as our investments, if it's aligned with different investor goals and lifestyle, then we connect those investors to passive income opportunities. So Sugo Capital over the last, since 2019, we've acquired not 24, but 26. We closed yesterday on 2 more apartment complexes. So 26 apartment complexes, they're all 100 to 400 units, and we acquire them together with investors. And I'm going to show you the structure later so that if it's aligned with what you want to do, you can go look for these types of structures out there. There's tons of people who did this. I am not unique. I'll just share with you how the structure generally works. So we have now that number increased by 72 million as of yesterday. So 813 million plus 72 million is the value of the assets we've acquired with investors. And I'm the advisory board member of 2 investment firms. I think it is the most fabulous job. I get to help so many people. And I think it's quite an honor that I'm in this position. So it was not a direct path here. So a lot of you might have taken my journey in the first 30 years of my life, which was, I thought, all growing up, we were talking, Constance, about the stories. What do we learn from our parents? I thought the best way to have a successful life and a luxurious life and, meet all my goals is to have the best grades and go get the best education. So in high school, straight A's, honors. I went to UC San Diego, pre-med, did a bunch of econometrics, which is now helpful in what I'm doing, but the bioengineering was not. But anyway, I studied that. I went to work and I was like, wow, this paycheck goes really fast. I need to make some more money. What should I do? So I went and got an MBA, again, in the UC system. So I thought, okay, an MBA is going to be the best way for me to get a better job, climb that corporate ladder, have that great career, and be successful and meet all my goals. Well, I climbed the corporate ladder, and each time it was like, okay, I got another $10,000 or $15,000 a year. That wasn't really changing my life. I was living in Silicon Valley, that the kind of average income is $250,000, $300,000 a year. And you just get by because real estate is so expensive, cost of living is so expensive. And so I was wondering one day, it was, soon after I'd had my first baby, like I was saying, I was like, there's a lot of people hanging around in my neighborhood who are not going to work every day. I'm going to find out what they're doing. So like we were talking about in the beginning, Scott, who do you want to learn from? So I went around to those people and I'm like, hey, you mind if I be a little bit nosy about what you're doing? You're hanging out during the day while I'm going to work and, shuttling my kids to daycare and stressed out, and you're just like chilling. What are you doing? And so some of them made money in real estate and some of them made money in tech and then invested in real estate. And I heard the message loud and clear that real estate was providing a different lifestyle for them. So I said, okay, I'm going to go learn as much as I can about real estate. So I started by reading the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I'm sure most of you have read it, but if you have not, I think that's it completely shifted how I thought about assets, liabilities, debt, time, money, all that stuff. And it was like a light bulb. And I was like, okay, I have a new path. I have a new way of living life. And so I went to Rich Dad University. I took like 5 or 6 different coaching programs through them, and it allowed me to put together some of the next slides that you're going to see. And then I also went through the coaching programs at RE Mentor. So both of these groups and institutions, they have a massive amount of education from people who are in the field, have successful 10+ year track records, investing in real estate successfully. So that's who I learned from, and that's who I was looking to follow it in the footsteps of. So what were my results? Well, in the beginning, not so good. So I learned all that stuff and I thought, I'm going to dip my toe in with duplexes. And I learned the 2% rule, which is you want to be able to rent the property for 2% of the purchase price every month. And that way you will have a profitable cash flowing property. So I found this property, and this is the before and after picture. And normally you want the before to be the ugly one and the after is the beautiful one that you fixed up. Well, I bought a turnkey and I didn't do proper due diligence on my property management company. So the after picture is when it's destroyed because the property management company put tenants in both sides of my property who were leaving an eviction, and they put them in my property. And this was my first property, so I didn't think to ask the property management company, did you do a background check? Did you look if they had any evictions in the past? I assumed they would do that. So that was one of my first big lessons, is that you can have all the numbers right in a spreadsheet, but it's the people executing on your behalf who make or break your plan, right? So if you and Scott went through some numbers yesterday and he talked about the ecosystem of the team, that team is so important. They make or break it. So to this day, like I said, we have 26 apartment complexes. I am not managing 26 apartment complexes. We have a huge team of property managers and asset managers, and we rely on them to make the money for our investors. And so now I have a very thorough due diligence process on those people, how we choose them, how to move away from them if the numbers don't work for us or for our investors. So I share all that to say this was my first investment. We ended up selling it as a loss because I was like, I can't be bothered. I'm in California with kids. This is over in Indianapolis. I'm just going to sell this thing and move on to a different type of investing because that wasn't right for me. And so if you've had an experience like this, where you invest in something and it's not right for you, don't give up. Go explore different kinds of investing because you're going to find something out there that works for you, your goals, and you'll find a team that's aligned with what you're looking to do. So after that, it wasn't a direct line. I explored some other things, but eventually I got to syndications. And so then I was a passive LP investor in syndications in hotel development and apartment complexes. And I was earning 18 to 25% annualized returns, doing nothing, not on the loan. I didn't have to deal with tenants of the property management companies. And I was like, yes. Okay, so I had my career, I had my kids. I could put my money passively with someone who would make it work. And they were the professionals. I was like, this is great. This is the thing for me. And I'm going to just skip that one. So then people started asking, how can I do the same thing, Sarah? Like, that looks pretty cool. I haven't heard of that. And so I started telling people around me who I knew. So for instance, this is Susan, and I was telling her about something, and she invested alongside me in a project, and she's in California. Emil was at the time in Colorado. And so Susan invested in this apartment building alongside me. And it's in Texas, and she's still getting 8% cash on cash. So every quarter she gets a check for 2% of what she invests into this apartment building. She's in California, it's in Texas, she does nothing. And so she's very happy with it. And Emil, he was in Colorado, he invested in this apartment building in South Carolina, but passively, and I'll show you guys the structure later today. And so he was getting checks, and then the property sold, and he got 45% annualized returns at the exit. He was super happy. He was like, I don't need this money now. We rolled it into the next investment using some tax strategy. He didn't have to pay any tax on his gains. And he's in the next apartment building now. And so then I started telling more and more people, and I thought, what kind of impact could I have if I wasn't limited to sharing this one-on-one with people that I knew? And so I started forming my company, and I started doing online education around investing, because what I was doing was successful to me, for me, it changed my life. And so I wanted to be able to help people to change their life. So that's the goal of today, is to help you discover something new. And if it's aligned with what you're looking to do, then to help you take action. And like I said, I met with over 750 people last year, and I went through this, a 4-step plan. It's a personal investment strategy plan. And I went through these 4 steps, which is what we're going to go through today as a group, all of you together, and we'll have breakout sessions so that you can kind of talk about it. So these are just some testimonies, basically people saying, hey, we went through this process and it changed our strategy. It changed our wealth building for the positive. It allowed people to get over the hump and actually start making progress on some of the things they had been thinking about for years. So that is my hope for you, that this kind of unlocks and gives you the ability to move forward on some of the things you've been thinking about for years or dreaming about for years. So the alarm clock is in 2018. So this is my income, you know, as I was changing jobs, trying to climb up that corporate ladder, getting my MBA and all that kind of stuff. And in 2018 was when I went, okay, I need to do things really different. There was a moment when, and I've shared this very publicly, but it was a bad mom moment, basically. And I looked at myself and I said, wow, I am not the person that I want to be. How can I change my life? And so in 2018, I wrote down some very, very specific goals. And it's really important who you tell those goals to. So I told those goals to my husband. We agreed on them. We agreed on replacing my income with investments before my daughter got into the 3rd grade. And I thought, I have no idea how I'm going to do that. So if you're sitting here saying, I have these big goals, I have no idea how I'm going to do it, doesn't matter. Write it down and then you'll figure it out. So we wrote it down. I had no idea that I was going to build Sugo Capital at that time, but I knew what my goals were and I knew the time frame. So I set a date, I set a number, and I agreed on it with my husband. And at the end of today, I'm going to show you the exact formula we used to set those goals. And then together we figured it out, and you can figure it out too. Okay, so the very first step in all of this, like I've been saying, how to determine what kind of investing is right for you. The first step is to set your vision and set your goals. So if you guys have a pen and paper, I don't know if you went through this with Scott yesterday, but I want you to write down what your vision is for your life. Some people want passive income. You know, when I get on calls with people, so now I do group calls instead of one-on-ones because we have so many people, but we'll have about 10 people in a room and I say, you know, what's your goal? What's your vision? And some people will say passive income, passive cash flow of $5,000 a month. Some people say, I want to double my net worth in the next 10 years. So you're going to choose really different investments based on those 2 goals, right? And that's okay. Or maybe your goal is, hey, I just sold my dental practice and I have this huge bucket of capital gains. I don't want to give it all away at tax time next year. What can we do about this? So maybe tax strategy. So not building your net worth, but holding on to your net worth is really your vision. So write it down, get really clear, because different investments will help you with those different goals. So get clear on your own vision. And in that vision, write a timeline, right? So some of you might be saying, I want passive income of $10,000 a month in the next 12 months. Some of you want passive income of $10,000 a month in 10 years. So in that case, you're going to really focus on building your net worth today. And then later, you're going to focus on that passive income goal. So also write down the time frame for each of the goals in your vision. Step 2 is be really clear with yourself on the level of effort that you want to spend building your portfolio, building your investments, because some are completely hands-off and some are really hands-on. And we'll talk about the differences in just a minute. And step 3 is to be clear with yourself on the level of risk that's palatable to you. So if you're running a business and you have a spouse who has some great W-2 income, maybe you're like, hey, I can be a little risky here. We have great income coming in. Some of you may be, like my parents who are no longer working. So they want to be a little safer because this is their nest egg for the rest of their life. And set the goal. So not only when do you need it, but also write down who do you need to tell. So I gave you the example of me not telling my goals very clearly to my CPA. So they made a recommendation that wasn't aligned with my vision. So really think about who do you need to tell. Is it your tax strategist, someone on Scott's team, a spouse, whoever you have in your ecosystem that you make decisions with. All right, so after you've written that all down, I'm going to go through 15 types of investments and how they can support those different goals. And so like I said, 10 years ago, I started going through all these coaching programs. So the numbers I'm going to show you are a bunch of different kinds of investments. And they're either what I've seen out there when I'm exploring investments for myself, or investments that I've offered, or investments that I've learned about in coaching programs. So know that they are not actual investments that I'm showing you. They're more like, hey, this is kind of the average that I see with this asset class. And know that with any investment that you make, no matter what investment it is, what asset class, there's risk associated with investing, including complete principal loss. All right, you're welcome from my attorney. Okay, so we're gonna talk about 15 types of investing next. And then after this, Tammy, I'm gonna ask you to help me with a breakout session because I want people to kind of talk about it, to share what investments they've been in, what have worked for them, what have been their experiences. So I think it's really great when you hear something new to hear other people's experience with it. So it can either validate it or they can tell you something, you can ask them questions, learn a little bit more. Okay, so when you're looking at investments, there's different numbers, and what do they mean? So investments might say, hey, this is projected to have a certain ROI, return on investment. That is different from cash flow. So cash flow is going to be the amount of money you get every month or the amount of money you get every quarter. Annual ROI means, hey, when it's all said and done over the life of the investment, how much money have you received divided by the number of years you've been in it? So you might get 2% year one, 0% year two, and 100% year three. Okay, so that's 102% divided by 3 years. That would be your annual ROI. So if your goals are around net worth building or leaving a legacy, you're going to want to really look for investments that have the highest or strongest ROI, the overall annualized return. If you're like, hey, I'm looking to create something in my life today, more abundance, more vacations, quit my job, a new vehicle, cash flow to pay for the lease, whatever it is, then you're going to want to focus on investments that have strong cash flow. So I want you to know that difference. We're going to compare the level of effort and risk for these 15 different types of investments. We're going to talk about the cash needed to get started. And this is really important because if you're a passive investor, you can't always decide how much you want to invest. So if you're an active investor and you're going to go out there and buy a single family home rental, you can say, okay, my budget is, $20K for a down payment. If you're in a passive investment, they might say, hey, the minimum is $100K to join this investment. I've looked at investments that say the minimum is 3 million. I'm like, okay, I got to find some buddies and we got to join together and create an LLC to get into this investment. So really pay attention to that so that before you spend time kind of digging into it, so that it's aligned with where you are today. Hold period. As new investors in passive investments, in private placements, know that a lot of investments are not liquid, that are private. So if you're used to, the stock market, you can buy, sell when you want, basically anytime, right? Most commodities, most public investments. But in private placements, oil and gas funds, real estate funds, real estate private investments, there's usually a hold period that the manager will tell you. And that's when your money is not liquid. So if they say it's a 5-year hold, it means you do not have access to your money for 5 years. So make sure you listen to that, because if your goal, your vision was to take this chunk of money and grow it to send your kid to college in 3 years, and the hold period for an investment is 5 years, that's a no-go, right? Because you won't have access to that money when you need it for a freshman and sophomore year. All right, so pay attention to that. And tax strategy. So I'll mention, I'm not a CPA, obviously, but I'll mention how these 15 types of investments could play into your tax strategy, and then you can take them to the person in your ecosystem who helps you with your taxes. All right, so can you guys see across the top of all the columns? Those are the the areas that I just talked about. And so down the column, the first column, we're going to go through 15 different types of investments. So the first one is single family home rentals. And I know Scott touched on this. This is usually what people think of when they think of investing in real estate. They think, oh, you know, I'll go buy a home, rent it out, and hopefully it'll cover the mortgage and that'll grow over time and provide, you know, some passive income for me later when I retire. So depending on where you live, this may or may not be a good strategy. In California, for instance, the mortgage to buy a home might be $10,000 a month, but to rent that same home, it might be $6,000 a month. So crazy landlords in California do this, and they are in the hole $4,000 a month. I don't know why they do it, but they do. They're hoping for appreciation later. I think it's not great to be a landlord in California. Other markets, it's totally different, where it might be the mortgage each month is $1,000, but you can rent out the home for $2,000. Okay, so that's a good deal. That's going to provide you cash flow. You don't have to hope for appreciation, but as long as that market is also appreciating, then that ROI can be even higher than your cash flow. So this strategy works depending on where you live and the level of effort you want to put into it. So you might be able to do, you know, 1 or 2 single family home rentals, but if you have a goal of cash flow of $10,000 a month, you're going to have to build out a proper portfolio of single family homes. So a lot of times people tell me they're getting $300 to $500 per month as positive cash flow from their single family home rentals after they pay all their expenses. So think about, okay, 10,000 a month divided by 500. Okay, that's like a portfolio you need to build. At that, your level of effort, so that's column number 3 with the H in it, I say high. That's a lot to manage that portfolio. And under risk, I also say high, because if you have one door and one tenant goes sour, you still have to pay for the mortgage, you still have to pay the taxes, you still have to pay for, you know, remodeling the place after they go out. So lots of times one bad tenant can destroy your profits for a year, maybe even 2 years. That's what I experienced. And a lot of people who experience that, they go, oh my gosh, the risk is too high. I'm just done with this. The level of effort is too high. So if that's your experience, know that the rest of everything else is more passive. But if you're in that space and you say, whatever, Sarah, like this is so easy in my market, it's really profitable, I have a great property management company and it's smooth, then great. If it's working for you, stay with that strategy. But know that there's a lot more to do, or a lot more available. But I do want to call to your attention that the hold period, I say your call, it's one of the most flexible, because in 30 days, in 60 days, you can sell that asset. If you're in a private investment or a fund, the hold period is usually fixed. So if you need liquidity, this is often one of the best. And I say tax benefit, and depends, I say yes, because it depends on how you hold it. But, you know, if you do a cost seg, something like that, you can take the tax benefits and you can expense things against it. So most of you have probably heard of house flipping. You can also flip land, which is pretty cool. I learned this strategy and I decided it was not for me, but it has a great ROI. So doing this, people are making 40 to 60% return on their money. Now, it is very active, like level of effort. You're involved, you're working, it's your job. A lot of people create businesses around this, but it can give you location freedom if you have a good team implementing this. It can give you time freedom. You can decide when to work and not work. It can give you financial freedom because you get a great ROI. Just know that it's actually a lot of work, but that's okay with some people. All right, hotel development. So depending on the market, these can be fabulous. So ground up, you know, they go and they buy a block, level it, build a hotel. They're often a little bit riskier. Any development project is a little bit riskier than buying real estate or an asset that's in place, right? But the returns are often fantastic. And so you can enter into development projects often in different phases. So like if you're in phase 1, that's the riskiest, because do you have the permits? Do you have the construction loan? Not yet, but we're hoping it all gets together. So often you can get like a 25 to 36% preferred return because you're in that risky position for 6 to 12 months. And then you can elect to jump out at the end of that phase. Sometimes you can jump in at phase 2, like, hey, we got the loan, we got all the permits, we're ready to break ground. It's still a little bit risky because, we haven't built it. We could run into delays and it might not get bought by a hotel chain, something like that. So you can still get a preferred return of about 25%. A preferred return of 25% a year is really excellent. So that's something to pay attention to. A lot of times so I have over in tax benefit, no. If you have something that's in development, whether it's a hotel or any real estate, you don't get any tax benefits. You can't do a cost seg or take depreciation or loss if you don't have income on that. And so when you're in the development phase, you're not getting any income. So no tax benefits until a later point in time. Usually the cash needed to start on these is higher. You see 250K. That's often what I see developers set as the minimum. And so just know that if this looks attractive, but what you can do is you can find other like-minded people and join together and create an LLC or, a little holding company for this investment and join in together if you like. Leverage commodities trading, not training. This is something that's totally exciting to me. And it's pretty new to me. So I've been doing this for 2 years. When I say I've been, I mean my husband, because I started learning about it about 2.5 years ago. And I kept trying to learn a little bit more and take the coaching and the courses, and it didn't quite sink in for me. There was something that didn't click with my brain. And so I said to my husband, hey, like I have this real estate portfolio and this all makes sense to me. Why don't you learn this and see if that makes sense to you? So I passed on my coach to him and the training to him. He was like, oh yeah, this is easy. This makes sense. I was like, great. So he was, that portion of our portfolio, and he was using that trading strategy, and it was extremely profitable. But what we learned was the level of effort was really high. So he was feeling emotional when he had the huge gains and the huge losses. Net, we made a lot of money. Net, he had a lot of emotional response. So what we did is we took the strategy, and now we have a bot that executes the strategy. So the algorithm that he was manually following, now there's an algorithm that a bot follows, basically. The returns are not as high because we've put them on really conservative settings, but that's creating some great cash flow for our life. So when you guys are thinking about your financial modeling and your portfolio, I'll give you some examples. So we like exotic cars. So to make the purchase of a car, we don't go put the full amount down, right? We don't say, oh, here's cash, a check for this large amount. What we do is we put down a 10% down payment and we get a loan for the rest. It's a 10-year loan to pay off the rest. And then with the rest of the money, we put it in an investment like this that cash flows. And so the money that we get from the investment every month goes into an account, and that account pays for the exotic car loans that we have. So that's an example of us at one point in time saying, hi, we want some exotic cars. That sounds fun. Do we have the cash for it? No. Is it responsible to go plunk down this money on a car? No. But how can we create something? So at that point, we had a cash flow goal. So we said, how can we create cash flow that's an extra, $3,000 a month that will pay the car notes? So think about that too. If what your vision is like, it's not quitting your job, it's not doing something, but it's acquiring something that has a monthly cost. Think about how you can create cash flow in your life in excess of, your paycheck or your investment income. Maybe it's borrowing money, which we're going to talk about later, borrowing money and investing it and taking advantage of the arbitrage there. So that's one of our new things. It's really fun. Private lending. So private lending is really attractive to a lot of people in our community, because you can make most of the decisions around it. So it's private. It's you and someone else making an agreement, right? I mean, you can be part of a private lending fund as well, and then you just kind of find one that matches your goals. You can also use your IRAs, your 401ks to do private lending in real estate. And it's really flexible because you make the contract. So you could find someone who's, say, a house flipper and say, hey, I don't need cash flow, but I would like a 30% return on my money once you flip this house. And so the level of effort is low. You have to find someone you trust, right? But having someone else do the work and you do the lending, and what's your collateral is the house. So those are, it's more flexible that way. And you can say, hey, I want this back in 6 months, or I want my 30% return at 12 months. So all that hold period and everything else, it says your call, because you can find someone and create the contract the way you want it. So that's pretty flexible. Any debt position you're in will not have a tax benefit. So you see that no in that last column. If you're an equity investor, like if you hold equity in a company or in real estate, you can use the tax benefits. But if you're a debt provider, you don't have any tax benefits from that. Apartment syndications. So that's what I do. I'm the manager of apartment syndications. So there's no cap, I say, on the cash flow, because I'm not using my money. I'm using other people's money. So it just depends on how much I want to scale my company. I'm not going to teach about that today because it's definitely not passive. It's very active. But for passive apartment syndications, it's really common what you see in this row right now. So an annual ROI of 20%, and I'm going to show you in next after the breakout room, like exactly how all this plays out on a timeline. But 20% annualized is really common in syndications, not just apartments, but other types of syndications, which I'll list in a second. Cash flow, I have 8%. Now, a lot of you who are invested with me are like, we're not seeing 8% right now. Okay, so this year, a lot of people have paused their distributions and investors are not getting cash flow. But that doesn't mean in general, syndications don't have cash flow. So this year it's tight and things are different, but when things go back to normal, and what have they been in the past? 8% is what we've seen. It's totally passive for investors. So level of effort, I have an L there for low, and risk. So apartment buildings, especially the type that we invest in, Class B, I say they're low level of risk, and I have about 60% of my net worth in apartment complexes because I feel that they are the best risk to reward ratio for my money. I think that other types of syndications might be a little bit riskier, but apartments, Class B, what happens when the economy contracts and people move from their homes, they move into Class B apartments. People who are in luxury apartments might move into Class B apartments. What happens when the economy expands? Well, people who are in Class C apartments might move up to Class B apartments. So that middle type of apartment building, as the economy expands and contracts, people might move in and out, but it usually has consistent occupancy overall. And so that's why I say it's a lower level of risk. Also low level of risk are storage units. Those stay strong whether the economy is booming or contracting. And also medical office parks. People don't move from those, right? So it's a really low level of risk. So I'm going to just bump through the rest of these because the rest of these are syndication related. And I'm going to show on the next slide how this structure works. I will say cash needed to get started. So you want to decide what you're comfortable with and then find an operator who works at that level. So some operators have a $25,000 minimum, some have a $50,000 minimum, some have a $100,000 minimum. So take a look at yourself and what you're comfortable with and find someone. If you can't find someone, you can go to Yield Street, Crowd Street, Fundrise. There's all kinds of crowdfunding websites out there that'll take a lower minimum. The whole period's usually 3 to 10 years on this, and there are tax benefits, which I'll show you how they're used later today. ATM funds. Okay. So what are ATM funds? So it's actually cash machines, right? So you can invest, and we have a couple million invested in ATM funds via one of our funds, not me personally, but one of our Sugo funds, because of the strong cash flow. Now, what is up here on the screen right now is inaccurate. And I left it as inaccurate because it was an easy mistake that a lot of people can make, and I want to call it out. So when you're doing due diligence on an investment, you pay attention to this piece of it, okay? So the investment I was looking to make, it said cash flow of 20 to 25% a year. I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I assumed that the annual ROI was also 20 to 25%. So I said, great. And so I was building my fund model, and I had those numbers in there. And then I was ready to sign the paperwork, and I was reading the legal docs really carefully. There's no return of principal on the back end. So after you're in there for 7 years, that's the end. So you put in $100,000, you get, say, $20,000 a year for 7 years. And at the end of 7 years, do you get your $100,000 back? No. So even though your cash flow might have looked like 20% per year, since you don't get your principal back on the back end, it means part of that was return of your principal. So your annual ROI is closer to like 11 or 12%. And so I realized that I redid my fund model, and it still worked with what I was trying to do. But I call that out because when you're looking at private investments, make sure you understand, do you get your principal back at the end of the year? I was at a dinner party with a guy who worked at a hedge fund, and he said he left the hedge fund because this is what they did. They returned 30 to 33% ROI for 3 years to investors. So all over their marketing material, they said 32% average cash flow for investors. Then at the end, they had no principal to return to investors, but they didn't include that. They just promoted their cash flow number. Like, oh, it's really great, average of 32% over the 3 years. But in the end, investors didn't get their money back. Their principal returned. So really, they had just returned investors' money over 3 years. Investors didn't net anything. But the hedge fund, just portrayed it a certain way, and that didn't sit right with his morals, so he quit. But I thought that was interesting. And so I want to point out, it's always good to look at when you're looking at a track record. Make sure that the numbers you're looking at, did investors get their principal returned? And is that part of the numbers? And then when you're looking to make an investment, make sure you know if principal is returned on the back end, because that's going to really change how you make your investment, right? So my lessons learned, pass on to you guys. Storage units. So that's a syndication structure, which I'll talk about that structure in a minute. Like I said, low risk. These are great when the economy is contracting. People are moving into smaller living spaces, so they get a storage unit. The economy expands. Do they go back and empty that? No, I have a storage unit from 2.5 years ago. Do I know what's in it? I know there's a tandem bike in there, but I don't know what else is in there. But we're still paying it every month. It's just like one of those things people never get to. So the turnaround is really low in storage units. And because of that, the cash flow is often quite nice. So you can get 10% cash flow on storage units quite easily. And you can go into a syndication, be passive. Funds might own 20 different storage units, and you can just be part of it passively. What do we have next? Mobile home parks, similar. You can enter into a fund that owns a bunch of different mobile home parks. Those have similar returns to everything else we've been showing. Individual mobile home rentals. So say you're not an accredited investor and you have $5K to work with and you really want to get started in real estate, but you can have some really great cash flow from mobile home parks. Individual mobile home rental. So when you're going to buy this, buy a mobile home, just make sure you know what the land lease is, so that when you're doing your numbers and figuring out what rent will be, that you take into account the land lease that you have to pay as well. Energy funds. So you see over on the right, tax benefit, I have yes with parentheses W2. This is the only investment that I've learned enough about, done enough due diligence on, and have personally invested in to see how we can reduce our W2 income or our active AGI. And so if you're like, yeah, all these real estate investments, they have a tax advantage, but I can't use them because I don't have passive income, but I have this really high W-2 income or a high income from my business I'm looking to offset. Well, energy funds, oil and gas, carbon capture, all these things can have about a 75% to 100% tax write-off in the first year or two. I say tax write-off, I should say tax deferral, excuse me. So what it means is if you put in $100,000, you could reduce your AGI, your taxable income, by $75,000 that year. So for example, if you made $100,000 and you invested $100,000, what are you going to be taxed on? $25,000 this year will show up as the amount that you pay income tax on. Overly simplified, but that one is really attractive for a lot of our investors who are currently high income earners, because it has a great tax benefit and it provides cash flow and it has a great ROI. This one, I have risk as medium. When you're looking to do this, I would say find something diversified. So similar to going back to single family homes, if you have one home you're renting and one bad tenant, then you're at a loss for a while, right? So same thing in oil. So if you're invested in one well, I hear from people a lot, oh, my neighbor, or I know someone who lost money in oil. I say, well, what were they invested in? Almost always it was they invested in one well, and that one well was not a success, and so they lost money. If you invest in a fund that has 200 wells, well, now you're diversified. So similar to a 200 unit apartment building, you could have a bunch of non-paying tenants and still have a positive net operating income. Similar with energy funds, if you are diversified across a bunch of things, a bunch of sites, a bunch of drilling locations, and half of them turn up to be duds and half of them are producing, you can still have a positive net operating income for the fund overall. So that would be my suggestion to lower your risk if you're going to go into those types of investments. Medical office parks, that's a syndication structure, which I'll talk about after our breakout. Private real estate funds, we have these as well that we offer at Sugo Capital. So they're private, and each one will have a different set of terms, but you can find some that, like we have one that has a 12% cash flow. There's no equity upside. You do get your principal return. So that's great for people who have a priority on cash flow. Not great for people who have a priority on net worth building, right? Tax liens and notes, that's something else I like to throw in there. It's really flexible. A lot of people make a lot of money doing that. I don't personally do it, but I think it's a fun strategy. We've been going for about an hour, so I'm going to pause and say, Tammy, this is where I'd like to do a breakout session, because I think it's great for, and I don't know how many people, I'll take your advice on this, how many people are put in each room, but I'd like everyone to discuss with each other your thoughts on this. Like, did you have any ahas? Like, oh my gosh, I had no idea you could do ATM funds. That's perfect for what I'm doing. Or, oh my gosh, I never knew you could invest in apartments passively. That role looks perfect for what I want to do. Have any of you guys done this? What was your experience? I want you to have those kind of conversations, and maybe let's just do 5 people a group, Tammy, and let's do 10 minutes. So everyone has about 2 minutes, and share your experience and ask questions, because maybe someone else had an experience they can share with you if you're not sure.
All right, sounds great. And Ken has put together those breakout rooms. So Ken, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and put everybody in. I think we had the timer set for 10 minutes. Is that okay, Sarah?
Perfect. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. Okay. Thank you.
All right.